Daniel Harris was a man who, from the outside, seemed to have it all. His name was synonymous with success in Boston's business circles, his empire reaching far and wide. His sprawling mansion, perched on the outskirts of the city, was a symbol of his wealth, a grand estate filled with modern luxuries and surrounded by acres of perfectly manicured gardens. Yet, for all the grandeur and material success that surrounded him, Daniel carried a burden that no amount of money or success could alleviate. Inside the mansion, which should have been filled with joy and laughter, there was a quietness, a silence that echoed through the halls like an invisible weight pressing down on everything. This wasn't always the case. Years ago, the mansion had been a vibrant home, filled with the laughter of his daughters, Ava and Emma, and the warmth of his beloved wife, Grace. But that warmth had been taken away in a single devastating moment. Grace's death in a car accident had been both sudden and cruel. Daniel had been driving the family home from a weekend trip, a rare getaway from his work that had promised to be a moment of peace and togetherness. The day had started perfectly. The girls had played by the lakeside, Grace had laughed and teased Daniel about his overprotectiveness, and the sky had been clear, with no hint of the tragedy to come. Then, in an instant, it all changed. The car had skidded on a patch of black ice, spinning out of control. Daniel still remembered the screech of tires, the sound of shattering glass, and the weightless terror of the car flipping. When it came to a stop, he was disoriented but alive. His daughters, miraculously, had only minor cuts and bruises. But Grace had been gone before he could even turn to reach for her hand. In the days that followed, Daniel had been consumed by a grief so deep that he often wondered how he could go on. The funeral had been a blur, a sea of condolences that felt hollow. And while the world expected him to eventually move on, the reality was far different. Every time he walked through the halls of his home, Grace's absence was palpable. The smell of her perfume still lingered faintly in their bedroom, and her favorite books remained untouched on the shelves. The once vibrant laughter of his daughters, which used to echo through the halls, had quieted into whispers of what it had been. They had all been changed by that day. Still, Daniel pressed forward. For Ava and Emma, he had to. He threw himself into his work, taking the company his father had built and expanding it into something much greater. His long hours and strategic genius paid off. The Harris Corporation became one of the most successful firms in Boston, a powerhouse in real estate development and investment. He was praised as a visionary, a man who could turn any deal into gold. People in his circle admired his relentless drive, his unyielding ambition. But beneath it all, Daniel was struggling. No one saw the exhaustion in his eyes at the end of each day, or the nights he spent lying awake, staring at the ceiling thinking about Grace. He was caught in a cycle, one where work consumed him and the few precious moments he could spend with his daughters felt fleeting, like sand slipping through his fingers. Despite everything he had accomplished, he couldn't escape the gnawing guilt that he wasn't present enough for Ava and Emma. They were growing up fast. Ava, the older of the two at 8, was becoming more thoughtful, more aware of the world around her. She had Grace's sharp intelligence and a fierce curiosity that always kept Daniel on his toes. But lately, Ava had become quieter, retreating into books and her drawings, a clear reflection of the loss she couldn't fully articulate. Emma, just 6, was still a bundle of energy, but Daniel saw the cracks in her smile. She clung to him more often now, always asking him when he would be home, always needing that extra reassurance. Daniel wanted nothing more than to be the father his daughters deserved, but his responsibilities were too great. The company had grown so large that it demanded more of him than ever before. There were deals that needed closing, new markets to explore, and investors to manage. Thousands of employees depended on him. The Harris Corporation was his legacy, and he felt the weight of that on his shoulders every single day. But as the business thrived, Daniel's personal life crumbled under the strain. He could feel the distance growing between him and his daughters, despite his best efforts to bridge the gap. It wasn't that he didn't care, he cared more than anything. It was that he simply didn't have enough time to be everything they needed him to be. He was stretched too thin, trying to be both a father and the CEO of a company that demanded his full attention. One night, after another grueling day at the office, Daniel returned home to the familiar silence that greeted him at the door. He walked through the halls, his footsteps echoing on the marble floors, and found himself drawn to his study, a place that had once been his refuge but now felt cold and distant. He sat down at his desk, running his hands through his hair, and stared at the family photo on the wall. It was from a time when things were different, when the four of them had been together, happy. Ava had her arm wrapped around Emma, both of them smiling brightly. Grace was next to Daniel, her hand resting on his shoulder, her smile radiant. It was the kind of happiness that seemed so far away now, like a distant memory he could barely grasp. Daniel felt a tightness in his chest, a familiar ache that had settled in the moment Grace had died and never fully left. He had tried to fill that void with work, with the successes that everyone else saw as achievements. But sitting alone in that study, surrounded by the trappings of his wealth, Daniel realized that none of it mattered. Not the money, not the accolades, none of it could bring back what he had lost. He looked out the window, the moonlight casting a pale glow over the vast gardens outside. The mansion was beautiful, but it was empty without the laughter and warmth that Grace had brought into their lives. His daughters deserved better. They deserved more than a father who was always working, always distracted. They needed someone who could be there for them in a way he couldn't. It was in that moment, sitting in the stillness of the night, that Daniel made a decision, one that he had resisted for so long. He needed help. Not just in managing the house or the day-to-day responsibilities, but someone who could truly care for Ava and Emma in his absence. He thought back to the times when Grace had always known how to make the girls feel safe, how to comfort them with just a look or a touch. Daniel didn't have that instinct. He was a provider, a protector, but nurturing didn't come naturally to him. He needed to find someone who could fill that role, someone who could bring back some of the joy that had been lost, someone who could give his daughters the attention they needed. A nanny. The word felt foreign to him at first, as though admitting he needed one was admitting some sort of failure. But as he sat there, staring at the photo of his family, he knew it was the right choice. He couldn't do it all alone anymore. The decision didn't come easily. Daniel had always prided himself on being able to manage everything on his own, but the truth was he couldn't. His business demanded too much, and his daughters deserved more than the little bits of time he could offer them between meetings and late nights at the office. He didn't want them to grow up feeling neglected, to look back on their childhood and only remember their father as a distant figure. He wanted them to be happy. And if he couldn't give them that, he would find someone who could. Daniel leaned back in his chair, a sense of resolve settling over him. The next morning he would start the process of finding the right person. Someone kind, trustworthy, and capable of bringing light back into Ava and Emma's lives. He wasn't sure how long it would take, but he knew one thing for certain. His daughters were worth it. For the first time in what felt like forever, Daniel felt a small glimmer of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get him through the night. And as he made his way to bed, the decision already made, he thought of Grace and whispered a silent promise, that he would do everything he could to make sure their daughters grew up happy, loved, and safe, even if he had to ask for help to do it. The morning after Daniel made the difficult decision to hire a nanny, he woke with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. His heart felt slightly lighter as he acknowledged that he could no longer carry the weight of his responsibilities alone. Still, he was wary, and trusting his daughters to a stranger, even one with the best qualifications, was not a step he took lightly. But if Ava and Emma were to have the stability they deserved, he had no other choice. Daniel spent the first few hours of his day drafting a job posting. It wasn't as simple as listing a set of duties and a salary. He knew that anyone looking at his ad would see an opportunity to work for a wealthy family, and he worried that it might attract people interested only in the paycheck. What he needed was more than just a nanny. He needed someone who could connect with his daughters on an emotional level, someone who could fill the void left by Grace's death, not as a replacement but as a comforting presence. He read through the job posting multiple times before finally pressing submit. Within hours, his inbox began to flood with responses. Applicants from all over the country were eager to apply for the position, drawn by the prestige of working for the famous Daniel Harris. Some included their impressive resumes, listing credentials from elite childcare centers and degrees in early childhood education. Others were more modest, claiming years of experience working with children, offering glowing references from families they had served. By the end of the first day, Daniel had over 20 candidates to choose from. That evening he sat down in his study, scrolling through the applications. He wanted to be excited, to feel like he was taking a positive step forward. But with every resume and cover letter, Daniel found himself feeling more disconnected from the people behind the words. Many were qualified, overqualified even, but none of them jumped out as the right fit. Something was missing. The next day Daniel began the interview process. His assistant had scheduled back-to-back appointments in a quiet office space at the Harris Corporation's headquarters. One by one the candidates arrived, each eager to make a good impression. They were all polished, professional, and well-prepared. Many recited their qualifications with practiced ease, explaining their years of experience working with children from prestigious families or in high-demand environments. Some talked about their approaches to discipline, their philosophies on education, or their ability to manage busy schedules. On paper they were perfect, But Daniel wasn't looking for perfection. He was looking for something he couldn't quite describe, an intangible quality that none of these candidates seemed to possess. Despite their impeccable resumes, they lacked the warmth and sincerity Daniel knew his daughters needed. Ava and Emma were still fragile, still recovering from the loss of their mother. What they needed most wasn't someone who could manage their routines or oversee their schoolwork. They needed someone who could understand their pain, someone who could nurture them in a way Daniel himself couldn't. By the end of the day, Daniel was exhausted. He had interviewed nearly a dozen candidates, but none had left him feeling confident. As he drove home, his mind raced. What if he couldn't find the right person? What if he was asking too much, expecting one person to provide the emotional support that he, as their father, should be giving? His thoughts swirled in a storm of doubt as he pulled into the long driveway leading up to his mansion. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the estate, but instead of feeling comforted, Daniel felt a deep sense of loneliness. That evening, he sat in the quiet of his study, surrounded by paperwork and resumes, the weight of his decision heavy on his shoulders. Was he being too picky? Should he settle for someone simply competent? He couldn't afford to make a mistake, not when it came to Ava and Emma. But just as he was about to close his laptop and call it a night, an email notification caught his eye. It was a new application, someone who had just seen the job posting. Daniel almost didn't open it, weary from the day's disappointments, but something about the simplicity of the email subject line made him curious. Nanny position Lily Roberts. He clicked on the message. Unlike the others, Lily's application wasn't filled with flashy language or over-the-top self-promotion. Her email was short, almost understated. She explained that she had been working with children for most of her life, often for families who were too busy to spend as much time with their kids as they wanted. She spoke of how much she loved caring for children and helping them feel secure, especially when their parents couldn't always be there. It was a sentiment that resonated deeply with Daniel. He couldn't help but be intrigued. Without thinking too much about it, Daniel replied, inviting her for an interview the next day. The following morning, Daniel sat in the same interview room, his coffee growing cold as he absent-mindedly stared out the window. He had gone through the motions with a few more candidates earlier in the day, but none had left an impression. The door opened and in walked Lily Roberts. She was nothing like the polished, businesslike candidates he had seen the day before. Dressed simply in a plain blouse and dark slacks, Lily's presence was calming. She was in her early 30s, her brown hair neatly tied back, and her eyes, though kind, held a quiet depth. As she sat down across from Daniel, he noticed the way she carried herself, not with the overly rehearsed confidence of the others, but with a natural ease. "Thank you for meeting with me, Mr. Harris," she said, her voice soft but clear. Daniel nodded, offering a polite smile. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Roberts. Can you tell me a little more about your experience?" Lily's gaze was steady as she began to speak. She didn't rush through her story, didn't try to overwhelm him with her qualifications. Instead, she spoke with quiet conviction, explaining how she had worked as a nanny for several families over the years. Some of the children she had cared for had come from families who were often absent, busy with demanding careers. She had always felt a sense of responsibility to make sure those children felt loved, secure, and heard. "I've seen how hard it can be for children when their parents are focused on their work," she explained. "It's not that they don't love their kids. It's just that they have responsibilities. I try to fill that gap for them, to be someone the children can rely on when their parents can't always be there." Her words hit home for Daniel. It was as if she understood, without him having to explain, the very situation he was facing. He leaned forward slightly, his interest piqued. "Why do you want this job?" he asked, curious about what had led her to apply. Lily hesitated for just a moment, her expression softening as she spoke. "My mother is in the hospital. She has a chronic illness and I've been helping take care of her for the past few years. But her medical bills have been overwhelming. This job would give me the stability I need to help her get the care she needs. I love working with children, and I think I could be a positive presence in Ava and Emma's lives." For the first time during the entire interview process, Daniel felt a connection. Lily wasn't just looking for a job. She was someone who understood the importance of family, of sacrifice, of love. He could hear it in her voice, the same quiet determination he had felt when he realized he had to do whatever it took to care for his own family. He paused for a moment, considering. Then he asked the question he'd asked every candidate so far. "The salary is $3,000 a month. Would that be enough?" Lily's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, Daniel could see the gratitude and surprise flicker across her face. "That would be more than enough, Mr. Harris," she replied, her voice trembling just a little. "It would help cover my mother's treatment. Honestly, this job would be a blessing for us. There was a sincerity in her words that touched Daniel. He could see that she wasn't just interested in the money, she was driven by a need to help her family just as he was. In Lily, Daniel saw a reflection of himself, someone who was willing to do whatever it took to care for the people she loved. He didn't need to think any further. "You'll start tomorrow," he said, smiling for the first time in days. Lily's face lit up with genuine happiness and she nodded quickly. "Thank you so much, Mr. Harris. I won't let you down." That evening, back at the mansion, Daniel sat Ava and Emma down for a talk. The girls were playing quietly in the living room, their toys scattered around them as they sat cross-legged on the floor. Emma was brushing her doll's hair, while Ava sketched something in her notebook. "Girls, I need to talk to you about something important," Daniel began, his voice gentle but firm. Ava and Emma both looked up, their wide eyes curious. "What is it, Daddy?" Ava asked, her voice thoughtful as always. Daniel smiled softly, sitting down on the couch. "Tomorrow, a new person is going to be helping out around the house. Her name is Lily and she's going to be taking care of you when I'm at work." Emma, always the more outspoken of the two, was the first to respond. "Are we getting a new nanny?" she asked, her brow furrowed in confusion. Daniel nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. You know how busy I've been with work. Want to make sure you both have someone here who can take care of you when I can't." Ava tilted her head, considering this. "Is she nice?" she asked quietly. Daniel smiled, thinking of Lily's calm demeanor and kind eyes. "I think you're going to like her very much." The girls exchanged glances, and though they seemed unsure, they trusted their father. Daniel hoped that Lily's presence would not only help with the day-to-day tasks but also bring back a sense of comfort and stability to their lives. He hadn't felt this hopeful in a long time, and for the first time since Grace's death, he allowed himself to believe that things might be okay again. As he stood up to kiss his daughters goodnight, Daniel felt a sense of peace wash over him. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of a new chapter, one that he hoped would bring healing not just for Ava and Emma but for himself as well. The sun had barely risen when Lily Roberts arrived at the Harris mansion, her heart pounding with both excitement and a trace of nervousness. Today marked the beginning of her new role, and though she had worked as a nanny for years, something about this family felt different. As she stood outside the grand entrance, the sheer size of the house, a sprawling stone estate with towering windows and ornate architecture, made her feel small. But Lily wasn't one to be intimidated by appearances. She had faced tougher challenges, and today her focus was on meeting Ava and Emma. The front door opened, and Daniel Harris greeted her with a welcoming smile. His demeanor, though polite, carried a certain weariness, the kind that came from balancing too many responsibilities for too long. He waved her inside, offering to take her coat. "Good morning, Lily. I'm glad you're here," he said, his voice warmer than she had expected. "Thank you, Mr. Harris. I'm excited to meet Ava and Emma," Lily replied, her smile genuine. She could feel the significance of this moment, knowing that today would set the tone for her relationship with the girls. Daniel led her through the expansive foyer, the marble floors gleaming under the morning light. Every corner of the mansion spoke of wealth and taste, but it also felt cold, as if it had been missing the warmth of family life for far too long. There were no scattered toys or signs of children's play, only pristine, orderly rooms. This was a house that had grown quiet, like the heart of a man who had long since learned to suppress his grief. As they approached the living room, Daniel's pace slowed, and Lily could see the hint of nervousness in his eyes. This wasn't just a first meeting between her and the girls, it was a test of whether she could bring something back to their lives that had been lost. "They're right in here," Daniel said softly, opening the door to reveal Ava and Emma sitting on the floor. The girls, both with delicate features and wide eyes, were engrossed in their play. Ava, the older of the two, was drawing quietly, her face serious with concentration as she sketched a picture of a tree. Her brown hair fell loosely around her face, and she occasionally tucked a strand behind her ear, a small frown of focus on her lips. Emma, the younger sister, was playing with her dolls, arranging them meticulously as if they were attending an important event. Her blonde curls bounced as she moved, and her light blue dress shimmered in the sunlight filtering through the large windows. Daniel cleared his throat gently. "Girls, I want you to meet someone." Both girls looked up, their eyes widening at the sight of Lily. Ava's expression was thoughtful, as if she were assessing this newcomer, while Emma's curiosity was more open, her head tilting slightly as she gazed at Lily. Lily knelt down, her smile warm but gentle, making herself less intimidating. "Hi there," she said softly, meeting their eyes directly. "I'm Lily and we're going to have lots of fun together." Ava and Emma didn't respond right away. There was a brief moment of silence as they both stared at her, their gazes searching for some sign of who this stranger was and what she meant for their lives. Ava's face remained impassive, though her eyes revealed a quiet uncertainty, while Emma seemed closer to breaking into a smile, her lips twitching with curiosity. "I like your drawing, Ava," Lily said, breaking the silence with a compliment that caught the older girl's attention. "That tree looks beautiful. Do you like to draw?" Ava hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yes," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I like drawing things from outside." "That's wonderful. Maybe later, you can show me more of your drawings," Lily offered, and this time she saw a flicker of interest in Ava's eyes. "And Emma," Lily continued, turning her attention to the younger girl, "it looks like your dolls are having a very important meeting. Are they planning something exciting?" Emma giggled, her shyness slipping away as she responded, "They're going to a party." "A party? That sounds like fun. Maybe we can plan more parties for them together," Lily suggested, her tone playful. Emma beamed, already liking the idea. Daniel, who had been standing quietly in the background, watched with a mixture of relief and gratitude. Lily's calm approach had worked. She had already begun to break through the girl's initial reserve. He had hoped for someone who could connect with his daughters on a deeper level, and in just a few minutes he could see that Lily was the right person for the job. Over the next few hours, the mansion came alive in a way it hadn't for a long time. The girls' initial shyness slowly melted as they explored the possibility of playing with someone new. Daniel had retreated to his office to catch up on work, but he couldn't help listening for the sounds of laughter that began to fill the house. It was subtle at first, quiet giggles and soft chatter, but by the afternoon the once quiet halls echoed with the playful noise of two children who had found a new friend. In the living room, Lily sat on the floor with Ava and Emma, fully immersed in their world. Ava had already shown Lily several of her sketches, her love for art becoming more evident with each drawing. She had always been a serious child, but as Lily praised her creativity, Ava's reserved demeanor began to lift, revealing the thoughtful and curious girl she was beneath her quiet exterior. "You're really talented, Ava," Lily said, admiring a sketch of a bird Ava had drawn. "I can tell you put a lot of thought into your drawings." Ava blushed slightly, pleased with the compliment. "I like to make them as real as possible," she admitted, her voice soft but growing in confidence. Lily nodded. "And you're doing a fantastic job. Maybe one day you could teach me how to draw like that." Ava smiled shyly, and Lily could see the connection forming. Ava, who had been the more difficult one to reach, was slowly warming to her. It wasn't just about the compliments, it was about the way Lily listened to her, gave her the space to share her thoughts, and treated her interests as important. Ava had been missing that kind of attention, and Lily sensed that she would thrive with just a bit more nurturing. Meanwhile, Emma's energy filled the room. She tugged at Lily's sleeve, demanding her attention with all the enthusiasm of a 6-year-old who had found a new playmate. "Let's play a game?" Emma insisted, her bright eyes full of excitement. "I want to show you my favorite one." Lily laughed and followed Emma to the garden, where the two of them, along with Ava who joined a bit later, invented a make-believe world of adventure. They raced around the yard, pretending to be explorers searching for hidden treasure, with Emma leading the charge and Ava contributing with creative details about the imaginary world they were navigating. As they played, Lily noticed something she hadn't expected. The weight that had settled on the girls since their mother's passing seemed to lift, even if just for a few hours. The laughter, the freedom to be children again, began to fill the empty spaces that grief had left behind. And in that moment, Lily knew she had a chance to make a real difference in their lives. As the weeks went by, Lily's role in the Harris household evolved into something more than just a nanny. She became a trusted companion for both Ava and Emma, someone who listened to their worries, shared in their joys, and provided the stability they had long needed. She was there every morning, making sure the girls ate a good breakfast before school, and she was waiting for them in the afternoons, ready to hear all about their day. Lily's patience with Ava was particularly striking. Ava often struggled with the weight of her emotions, especially when thinking about her mother. She wasn't the type to cry or lash out. Instead, she retreated into herself, hiding behind her drawings and books. But Lily saw through that quiet facade. She gave Ava the space she needed, never pushing too hard but always making sure Ava knew she was there. Slowly, Ava began to open up more, sharing her thoughts and feelings, trusting Lily in a way she hadn't trusted anyone since her mother's death. For Emma, Lily was a playmate and a confidant. Emma had a boundless energy that needed an outlet, and Lily became the person she could rely on for that. Whether they were baking cookies in the kitchen or playing dress-up in the garden, Emma was always by Lily's side, her infectious laughter filling the house. But more than that, Emma found comfort in Lily's presence. She wasn't just the fun nanny, she was someone Emma could run to when she had a nightmare or when she just needed a hug. One particularly sunny afternoon, the three of them were playing outside, chasing butterflies in the garden. Emma suddenly stopped, turning to look up at Lily with wide, serious eyes. "You're like an angel," she said, her voice full of wonder. Lily, surprised, knelt down to meet her eye level. "An angel?" she asked, laughing softly. "Why do you say that?" "Because you make us happy again," Emma replied with the simple, honest truth that only a child could express. Lily felt her heart tighten at those words, tears pricking her eyes. She hadn't realized just how much the girls had needed this, how much they had needed her. And in that moment, it wasn't just about being a nanny anymore. It was about helping heal the broken pieces of their hearts, one day at a time. While Lily could never replace Grace, she understood now that she was filling a different kind of role in Ava and Emma's lives. She wasn't there to take their mother's place, but to help them find joy again, to remind them that they could still laugh, still feel loved, and still be children. As the afternoon sunlight bathed the garden, Lily smiled and reached out to pull both girls into a hug. "You two are my angels," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. And in that small, quiet moment, surrounded by laughter and the warmth of the sun, Lily knew she had found her place in their lives. In the weeks following Lily's arrival, the Harris mansion began to change. The once quiet, almost melancholic house slowly filled with warmth and light. What had once been a somber, hollow place now echoed with the sounds of laughter, storytelling, and the comforting rhythm of family life. Lily had, without a doubt, become the glue that was holding Ava, Emma, and Daniel together, but the transformation wasn't merely about routine. She had brought back something intangible, something Daniel had feared might be lost forever. Each evening, the same ritual unfolded in the girls' bedrooms. After dinner, the sun would set, casting a soft glow through the mansion's large windows. The girls would hurry upstairs, their excitement palpable as they prepared for their favorite part of the day. Bedtime had once been a reminder of loss for Ava and Emma. Grace had always been the one to sit at the edge of their beds, reading to them until their eyes grew heavy and their dreams took over. After her death, Daniel had tried his best to continue the tradition, but his attempts had always fallen short. He was a good father, but he couldn't replicate the warmth and comfort that Grace had provided so effortlessly. Lily, however, had taken up the task with tenderness. Each night, she would settle into one of the old rocking chairs in the girls' shared room, her voice carrying them away on adventures through stories of brave princesses, clever animals, and magical worlds. She had a gift for storytelling, weaving tales with a softness that made the girls feel safe and loved. Ava, ever the artist, had taken to sketching scenes from the stories Lily read, her imagination ignited by the words. And Emma, with her boundless energy, would often act out the stories the next day, her dolls becoming the characters in Lily's nightly tales. It was as if Lily had opened a door that allowed them to step back into the world of make-believe, a world that had been closed off since Grace's passing. "Please, just one more story, Lily," Emma would beg, her eyes wide and full of hope as Lily finished the last page of a book. Ava, quieter but no less eager, would chime in. "Just one more, please." Lily would smile, pretending to consider their request for a moment. "All right, but just one more. After that, it's time to sleep." The girls would cheer, pulling their blankets up to their chins and settling in for the next adventure. Daniel, from his position in the hallway, would often find himself lingering by the door, listening to the soft cadence of Lily's voice and the giggles of his daughters. These moments, though small, filled him with a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. For Daniel, watching this unfold brought a quiet sense of relief. He had been terrified that after Grace's death, his daughters would carry the weight of that grief forever, and for a time, it had seemed like they might. But now, with Lily's presence, it was as if they had permission to be children again, to laugh and dream without the shadow of loss hanging over them. He could see it in their smiles, in the brightness of their eyes, and in the way they bounded down the stairs in the morning, eager to start the day. Lily had a way of connecting with both girls in unique and special ways. Ava, who had always been more reserved, found in Lily someone who understood her without the need for many words. Lily never pushed, never pried. She simply sat with Ava when she was working on her drawings, offering gentle encouragement and listening when Ava felt like sharing. It was in these quiet moments that Ava began to open up, talking about her mother, her school, and her dreams for the future. With each passing day, her confidence grew. Emma, on the other hand, thrived on Lily's boundless energy and playfulness. They would often spend afternoons in the garden, playing make-believe games that Emma seemed to invent on the spot. Whether they were pretending to be explorers searching for hidden treasure or princesses defending their castle from imaginary dragons, Lily embraced Emma's vivid imagination wholeheartedly. The garden, once a place of solitude, now felt alive with their laughter, the air buzzing with joy that had long been absent. Daniel marveled at how effortlessly Lily had integrated herself into their lives. She didn't just take care of the girls, she seemed to genuinely care for them. He saw it in the way she brushed Emma's curls out of her face when she was focused on a game, or how she would gently guide Ava when she struggled with her homework, encouraging her to keep going even when frustration set in. These were small, tender moments, but they left a big impact on both girls. As time went on, however, Daniel couldn't help but feel a growing sense of curiosity about Lily. Who was this woman who had come into their lives and so easily healed wounds that he thought would never mend? She was kind, patient, and always there when his daughters needed her. But there was something else, something beneath the surface that Daniel couldn't quite put his finger on. It was as if there was a part of Lily that remained closed off, something she hadn't yet shared with them. It wasn't that she was secretive. On the contrary, she was open and friendly, always willing to talk about her day or listen to the girls recount their adventures. But Daniel noticed small things, like how she sometimes seemed lost in thought when she believed no one was looking, or how she carefully deflected questions about her past. He remembered the interview when Lily had mentioned her mother's illness. It had struck him then how similar their stories were, both of them caring for someone they loved while balancing the demands of life. But now, Daniel found himself wondering what had happened to her mother. Was she still in the hospital? Was Lily managing to support her with the salary he provided? These questions circled in his mind, but he never asked them outright. He wasn't sure why, but a part of him felt that if he pressed too hard, he might disrupt the delicate balance they had all found. And then there was the familiarity. Every now and then, Daniel would catch a glimpse of something in Lily's demeanor that seemed oddly familiar. It wasn't in the way she spoke or how she interacted with the girls, but in the small, almost imperceptible ways she moved through the house. He would see her pause to straighten a picture frame, pick up a toy left on the floor, or glance at the garden through the window with a faraway look in her eyes. There was something about the way she did these things that reminded him of someone from a different time, a different life. It wasn't until one quiet evening after the girls had fallen asleep and the house had settled into a peaceful calm, that Daniel began to reflect more deeply on his feelings of curiosity. He was sitting in his study, the soft glow of the desk lamp illuminating a stack of paperwork that he had been meaning to get through. But instead of focusing on the numbers in front of him, his mind kept drifting back to Lily. There was no denying the impact she had made on their lives. She had brought joy back into the mansion, given Ava and Emma a sense of stability and happiness, and for the first time since Grace's passing, Daniel felt as if the weight of his grief had lifted slightly. But that sense of relief was accompanied by a growing desire to know more about the person who had made it all possible. Daniel found himself wondering about Lily's life before she had come to them. What had led her to this moment? Why had she chosen to be a nanny, caring for other people's children, when she clearly had the intelligence and potential to do so much more? And what about her family? The brief mention of her mother during the interview had sparked something in Daniel, but Lily had never brought it up again. He wasn't used to not having answers. As a businessman, Daniel was someone who thrived on certainty. He made decisions based on facts, on knowing every angle of a situation. But with Lily there were too many unknowns. It wasn't just curiosity, there was a sense of protectiveness growing in him. He wanted to make sure she was okay, that whatever burdens she carried weren't too much for her. After all, she had become more than an employee. She was part of their family now. The more Daniel thought about it, the more he realized how important Lily had become to him, not just as someone who cared for his daughters but as a person. He wanted to know her story, to understand what had shaped her into the woman who had so effortlessly mended the broken pieces of their lives. But he wasn't sure how to ask. There was a vulnerability in the way Lily carried herself, a quiet strength that suggested she had been through her own battles. Daniel knew that prying too much could push her away, and the last thing he wanted was to disrupt the delicate bond she had formed with Ava and Emma. But the questions lingered, quietly demanding answers. As the days turned into weeks, Daniel found himself watching Lily more closely, not out of suspicion but out of a desire to understand her better. He noticed the way she interacted with the girls, how she listened to their stories with genuine interest, how she offered comfort without hesitation. She was a natural caregiver, but there was something more, an empathy that went beyond what he had seen in other nannies. He began to wonder if her own experiences had given her that empathy. Had she faced loss as he had? Was there something in her past that had made her uniquely suited to understand the pain his daughters had endured? These thoughts consumed him, and though he tried to push them aside, they kept creeping back into his mind. One evening, as Daniel stood in the hallway outside Ava and Emma's room, listening to Lily's soft voice reading a bedtime story, he realized that he couldn't go on without knowing more. He had to understand the person who had brought such light into their lives. He had to know who Lily Roberts truly was. And so, he made a quiet decision. In the coming days, he would find a way to ask her. He would learn more about the woman who had so effortlessly become part of their family, and perhaps in understanding her, he would finally be able to fully let go of the grief that had held him captive for so long. As the weeks passed, Daniel couldn't shake the growing curiosity that filled his mind whenever he thought of Lily. Her presence had undoubtedly transformed the atmosphere of the Harris mansion. The once quiet halls now echoed with laughter, and both Ava and Emma were thriving under her care. Every night, Lily read the girls their bedtime stories, a ritual that had once been Grace's, and it quickly became a cherished part of their day. Ava, who had always been introspective and quiet, had started to open up, sharing more of her thoughts and feelings, while Emma's energy and enthusiasm seemed boundless once again. Daniel observed this transformation with a mixture of gratitude and amazement. His daughters were happy, their smiles more frequent, their eyes brighter. But even as he watched from the sidelines, grateful for the happiness Lily had brought back into their lives, an unshakable curiosity nagged at him. Who was Lily really? How had she so seamlessly integrated into their lives? And why did she feel so familiar, as if Daniel had met her, or someone like her, before? The question hung in the back of his mind as he went about his daily routines. At first he tried to dismiss it. Lily was a professional, and she had done everything right since joining their family. She cared deeply for Ava and Emma, and that was enough, wasn't it? Yet, Daniel found himself noticing the subtle, almost imperceptible ways she moved through the house. The way she straightened a crooked picture on the wall or adjusted a flower vase without being asked. It wasn't just the task she completed, it was the natural ease with which she made their house feel like a home again. Despite his satisfaction with her work, Daniel couldn't help but wonder about Lily's past. What had led her to this point in life, working as a nanny for his family? Why had she chosen this path? And, most importantly, what had given her the quiet strength and deep empathy that had so profoundly impacted his daughters? There were moments when Daniel caught glimpses of Lily's own vulnerability. Sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, she would seem lost in thought, her expression distant as if her mind was miles away. Other times, he noticed how quickly she changed the subject when asked about her family or her life before coming to work for him. These small moments stirred his curiosity even more, and while he respected her privacy, he couldn't help but feel that there was more to Lily than met the eye. One evening, after the girls had gone to bed, Daniel found himself sitting in his study, staring at the paperwork on his desk but unable to focus. His thoughts kept returning to Lily. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that he needed to know more. Was it fair to remain in the dark about someone who was so deeply involved in his daughters' lives? On one hand, asking Lily more about her past could provide him with the peace of mind he craved. On the other hand, prying too deeply might disrupt the harmony she had brought to the household. Daniel weighed the pros and cons. On the positive side, learning more about Lily could give him a better understanding of the person he had entrusted with his daughters. Knowing her background could provide insight into her motivations, her values, and her future goals. This knowledge could bring him a greater sense of comfort and security. After all, Lily wasn't just an employee, she had become an integral part of their family dynamic. But there were downsides as well. Lily had already proven herself trustworthy and caring, so was it necessary to dig into her past? Would asking too many personal questions make her feel uncomfortable or even unwelcome? Daniel didn't want to risk losing her or damaging the relationship she had built with Ava and Emma. If she had chosen not to share certain parts of her life, perhaps it was for a reason. As Daniel pondered this, he thought back to his initial interview with Lily. She had mentioned her mother's illness and how the job would help cover her medical expenses. That story had struck a chord with Daniel at the time, as it mirrored his own struggles with balancing family and responsibility. But since then, Lily hadn't brought it up again. Was her mother still ill? Was she receiving the care she needed? Daniel realized he knew almost nothing about the ongoing challenges in Lily's life outside the walls of their home. The next morning, Daniel decided to act, albeit cautiously. He wasn't one to rush into sensitive matters, especially when it involved someone as important to his daughters as Lily. Instead, he began by observing her interactions with Ava and Emma more closely, paying attention to the little details he might have missed before. It wasn't that he distrusted her, quite the opposite. He simply wanted to understand more about the woman who had managed to heal so much of what had been broken in their lives. One afternoon, while Lily was in the garden with Emma, playing one of their imaginative games, Daniel took the opportunity to talk to Ava. He had always found her to be more intuitive, more perceptive about the people around her. "Hey sweetie," he began, sitting down next to Ava as she sketched. "How are things going with Lily? You seem to really like her." Ava looked up from her drawing, her brow furrowed slightly in concentration. "She's great, Dad. She's nice and she listens. I like when she helps me with my drawings. She's good at telling stories too." Daniel smiled. "I'm glad to hear that. Do you ever talk to her about anything else? Like where she's from or her family?" Ava paused for a moment, considering the question. "Not really. I asked her once about her mom, but she didn't say much. I think she gets sad when she talks about her family." Daniel nodded, his suspicions confirmed. Lily was clearly keeping parts of her life private, and while that was her right, it only fueled his curiosity further. He thanked Ava for her insight and decided to approach the subject directly with Lily, carefully of course. That evening after dinner, Daniel found an opportunity to speak with Lily while the girls were playing upstairs. They were in the kitchen, cleaning up after the meal, and the atmosphere was relaxed. He cleared his throat, trying to find the right words. "Lily, I've been meaning to ask, how are things going with your mother?" Daniel asked, his tone gentle. "You mentioned during your interview that she was ill. Is everything okay?" Lily froze for a brief second, her hand pausing over the dish she was drying. But she recovered quickly, offering a small smile. "She's doing all right, Mr. Harris. It's been tough, but the treatment has been helping. Thank you for asking." Her response was polite, but Daniel sensed that there was more beneath the surface. He decided to press just a little further. "I'm glad to hear that. I know how difficult it can be balancing everything. If you ever need anything, time off, extra support, please don't hesitate to ask. You've been such a help to us. I'd like to make sure you're not stretched too thin." Lily's eyes softened, and for a moment, Daniel thought he saw something flicker in her expression. Gratitude, perhaps, or maybe relief. But just as quickly she composed herself, nodding. "Thank you, Mr. Harris. I really appreciate that. But I'm managing just fine." Daniel didn't push any further, not wanting to make her uncomfortable. But as Lily returned to her tasks, the conversation lingered in his mind. It wasn't that she had said anything alarming, it was the way she had said it. There was a heaviness in her words that hinted at burdens she wasn't sharing, and Daniel couldn't help but wonder if there was more to Lily's story than she had let on. In the days that followed, Daniel found himself even more attuned to Lily's presence. He watched as she continued to care for Ava and Emma with the same gentle, attentive nature that had earned her their love and trust. But now, his curiosity wasn't just about protecting his daughters, it was about understanding Lily as a person. She had become an integral part of their lives, and Daniel knew that if he truly wanted to move forward, both for himself and his family, he needed to fully trust her. And yet, as much as he wanted to ask more, he found himself hesitant. Trust wasn't something that could be forced, it had to be built. Perhaps Lily would share more in her own time when she was ready. But until then, Daniel resolved to remain patient, watching and waiting for the right moment to uncover the deeper truths behind the woman who had brought so much light back into their lives. The mansion was finally alive again, but Daniel couldn't ignore the shadows that still lingered, both in his own heart and in the mysterious corners of Lily's life.